Before reading the poem, you must understand that the poem was written 4 years after the Civil Rights Movement was over. The poem itself was also written in Giovanni's first trip to Africa. Look for the comparisons the reader uses and what they mean.
I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light. I'm bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert. With a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes, I crossed it in 2 hours. I'm a gazelle. So swift, you can't catch me. For a birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son, Hannibal, an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. My son Noah built Newark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Then intoned my loving name, all praises, all praises. I am the one who would save. I sowed diamonds in my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thinned and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended except by my permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky.
Writing poetry inspired by the Civil Rights Movement. The poem Ego Tripping literally describes an egotistic woman who is black. The woman described makes herself sound like a goddess by indicating she can do things that are nearly impossible for an average human. This woman, described in the poem, happens to be Giovanni. As the poem goes on, she makes it clear to the readers that she is proud of both her race, heritage, and their accomplishments. The theme and poetic devices used throughout the poem are appropriate due to the time period of when ego tripping was written. The Civil Rights Movement had just ended a few years ago, and the African Americans were then beginning to rise as a proud and powerful race. Nikki Giovanni's poem, Ego Tripping, expresses her pride as an African American. Is through the use of metaphors. The metaphor stating, I am a gazelle so swift, in line 22, insists that Giovanni is one of the fastest animals in the world. The use of the metaphor proves that the woman has confidence in herself. Again, when the speaker turns herself into herself and is Jesus, in line 31, a metaphor is used to express that she sees herself as a goddess. The comparison to a god through the use of metaphors is yet another way that Giovanni asserts that she is powerful and proud. Giovanni wraps up her poem through the use of a simile which shows the idea of freedom and power. In the last stanza of the poem, Giovanni compares herself to a bird flying in the sky. At this moment in the poem, the speaker no longer becomes this goddess she had spoke of earlier in the poem. Giovanni uses a bird flying to represent the freedom that African Americans have. Once African Americans had freedom, they began to build confidence in themselves and hold power as humans. The quote itself is from the song I Can't Get Next to You, written by The Temptations. The lyrics are about women having power over men and how men would not be able to live their lives without women. The song is relevant to Giovanni's theme of pride because African Americans can take the place of the woman in the song and are then seen as powerful compared to the white race. Giovanni uses a strong simile to wrap up her poem by conveying the power of African Americans. Although Giovanni is the one who is constantly seen as a goddess and is the one with all the power in the poem, Giovanni reveals both her pride and the African Americans' pride throughout ego tripping. Some of the ways Giovanni demonstrates the dignity of African Americans are through the use of poetic devices. In order for Giovanni to assert her pride as an African American, she uses metaphors along with similes. As time passes, ego tripping, along with Giovanni's other poetry inspired by the Civil Rights Movement, continues to leave a mark on readers' lives. Before reading, keep in mind that Nikki Giovanni usually has soft-spoken poems with relatable themes to the readers. In life, one is always balancing. Like we juggle our mothers against our fathers, or one teacher against another, only to balance our grade average. 3 grains of salt to 1 ounce truth, our sweet black essence, or the funky hunkies down the street. And lately, I've begun wondering if you're trying to tell me something. We used to talk all night and do things alone together, and I've begun, as a reaction to a feeling, to balance the pleasure of loneliness against the pain of loving you. Giovanni's poem Balances is literally about the balances throughout life. However, towards the end, the reader picks up on the speaker's true balance that she has been working on. The poem itself is written in first person to express the personal connections. Overall, Giovanni's poem Balances uses comparisons that are relevant in one's life to show the inner struggle to stay or go. Each stanza of Giovanni's poem makes a comparison to things that must be eternally balanced in life. In the first stanza, the readers are aware that the speaker will be addressing things that must be balanced in life. As humans, we must balance our mothers against our fathers in order to succeed. School and the grades achieved must be balanced from teacher to teacher. The comparisons are used to help the readers understand the clear meaning of the poem once it reaches the main focus. Through the use of comparisons, Giovanni illustrates the balances individuals face eternally in their daily lives. All of the comparisons Giovanni mentions throughout the poem lead up to the speaker's main inner balance in which they are struggling with. In the last stanza, the pleasure of the loneliness against the pain of loving is used to show the struggle of the speaker who is trying to love another. The speaker begins to wonder whether it is worth it to love the individual or if the pain is too strong and life would be better alone. Giovanni uses a deeper comparison to express the main point of the poem and establish an easier way for the readers to understand the conflicts of love. The final comparison Giovanni addresses emphasizes the speaker's true inner struggle. Through the use of common comparisons, Giovanni eventually expresses an inner conflict within the speaker. The struggle explored in the soft-spoken poem Balances is whether to continue to love or go. Giovanni demonstrates balance through the use of average comparisons that are seen in one's life. The poem then turns into a serious balance dealing with the idea of love. The complex ideas of loneliness, pain, and love enhances that idea of balance in life. Balances is ultimately a soft-spoken poem written so simple that it can be taken in a complex manner, depending on the reader and their experiences. Before listening to the poem, keep in mind that many of Nikki Giovanni's poems are written in a way that readers are unable to tell if the poem is a poem unless seeing the stanzas the poem is broken down into. Some people forget that love is tucking you in and kissing you goodnight, no matter how young or old you are. Some people don't remember that love is listening and laughing and asking questions, no matter what your age. Few recognize that love is commitment, responsibility, no fun at all, unless love is you and me. Love is one of Nikki Giovanni's softest poems that explores the meaning of love. The speaker claims that love is often thought of in the wrong way. Love is commitment and responsibility that many forget about. Nikki Giovanni's poem, Love is written with the advice-like tone which is seen through Giovanni's use of punctuation and free verse. Throughout Giovanni's poem, the tone is created through the lack of punctuation. There are no places in the poem where the speaker is able to take a breath and pause. Ultimately, the poem flows as if the speaker is face-to-face with the reader. The only type of punctuation used is the occasional capital letters Giovanni uses in the beginning of certain lines. As readers, we can assume that the capital letter may signal a slight pause in the line before. In the beginning of the first stanza, the speaker is talking about how you should tuck your loved ones in at night, no matter how young or old you are. That follows with "Some people don't remember," which demonstrates the change in topics through the use of a capital letter. The reason she does not just put a period at the end of the stanza is because when one is giving advice, there are oftentimes little pauses to signify that the topic is important and must be said. Giovanni does not use punctuation that is often seen in other poets' poetry in order to give the poem a personal, advice-like tone. Because Giovanni uses free verse and love is, the style gives the poem an advice-like tone. The poem is free verse due to the lack of rhyme and meter the poem was given. Giovanni could have gave the poem a sing-songy rhyme in order to enhance the feeling of love, but instead she sticks to the free verse, which allows for the poem to sound like another person is preaching it in a way. When the speaker states, "Some people don't remember that love is listening and laughing and asking questions no matter what your age," the lines make up what would sound like a complete sentence. However, the reason the lines are not punctuated like a sentence is due to Giovanni's choice of free verse and how she decides to go about it. Giovanni's free verse in her poem not only demonstrates flow, but also illustrates the advice the speaker is giving to the readers. Giovanni's use of punctuation and free verse in her poem "Love Is" explores the advice-like tone the poem gives off. Although the poem seems simple at first read, the style and the tone that are used allow for the readers to understand just what Giovanni wants individuals to get out of her poem. Giovanni's poems may often be seen like every other poem, however, once the readers dive into her poems, they take notice that the poems do not read like traditional poems, and instead sound like a kind of their own.